The power of the Ibini Ukpabi oracle, the voice that shaped nations. Long before colonial flags were planted in African soil, before the British courts, Christian missions, or the boundaries of modern Nigeria, the Ibini Ukpabi oracle stood as a towering force in the spiritual and political life of southeastern Nigeria. Known by outsiders as the Long Juju of Arochukwu, the oracle was more than a shrine. It was a court, a voice of justice, a center of diplomacy, and a symbol of power that stretched across vast Igbo territories and beyond. In a world without written law, it offered rulings. In a landscape without central government, it unified. And in an age of encroaching imperialism, it became a threat. Located in the sacred caves of Arochukwu, in present-day Abia State, the Ibini Ukpabi oracle was housed within a sprawling complex of shrines, tunnels, chambers, and spiritual thresholds. At the heart of this network was the voice, believed to be a direct communication from the spirit world. Those who entered came seeking truth, justice, or absolution. Many did not return. To understand the power of the oracle, one must first understand the structure of pre-colonial Igbo society. Unlike the centralized kingdoms of Benin or Oyo, Igbo communities operated under a decentralized system of governance. There were no kings in the conventional sense. Authority was dispersed among elders, lineage heads, secret societies, and women's councils. Yet despite this lack of formal hierarchy, a shared respect for certain spiritual institutions created cohesion, and none was more respected or feared than the oracle at Arochukwu. The oracle functioned as a pan-regional tribunal. When disputes arose between clans, villages, or even distant ethnic groups, parties would journey to the oracle for judgment. The process was ritualized. Those accused of serious crimes, like theft, murder, or sorcery, underwent a trial before the oracle. The verdict, delivered through a complex series of signs, was believed to reflect the will of the gods. A ruling from Ibini Ukpabi was final. There was no appeal, no override. For those found guilty, punishment could mean death, spiritual exile, or permanent servitude. For the innocent, it meant restoration of honor and the clearing of one's name. The influence of the oracle grew with the rise of the Aro Confederacy, a network of allied clans, traders, and priestly lineages centered in Arochukwu. The Aro people, through their control of the oracle and its surrounding shrines, established a political and commercial empire stretching across Igbo land and into parts of present-day Cross River, Akwa Ibom, and beyond. They acted as mediators, spiritual guides, and economic brokers. Their caravans traveled with not just goods but authority. Their word carried weight. The oracle was their backbone. But power is never without controversy. Over time, the oracle became entwined with the transatlantic slave trade. Accusations have been made, both historically and in contemporary retellings, that the oracle was manipulated to condemn individuals unjustly. Those deemed guilty might be sold into slavery. Whether through internal politics, rivalries, or external pressure, some argue that the sacred was turned into profit. Others maintain that the misuse came not from the oracle itself, but from those who controlled access to it. Regardless, by the mid-1800s, British missionaries and colonial agents began targeting the oracle as both a symbol of heathen superstition and a nexus of what they termed native injustice. To the British, Ibini Ukpabi was dangerous, not only because of its alleged role in the slave trade, but because it defied their logic of governance. The oracle was invisible to their systems of command. It issued judgments outside colonial courts. It influenced communities they sought to dominate. It was, in short, a rival authority, spiritual, political, and moral. And so, as British commercial interests along the Niger River turned into colonial ambitions, the oracle moved from curiosity to enemy. By the late 19th century, the Royal Niger Company, under figures like Sir George Goldie, began exerting pressure on the interior of what would become Nigeria. Palm oil had replaced slaves as the dominant export, and the economic value of the Igbo hinterland skyrocketed. But British merchants and colonial officers found themselves blocked by communities loyal to traditional systems of justice and power, systems anchored by the Aro network and the oracle at Arochukwu. In 1901, the British launched a full military expedition against Arochukwu. The campaign, known as the Aro Expedition, was brutal. Thousands of colonial troops, including African soldiers under British command, advanced with Maxim guns, rifles, and explosives. The defenders, warriors from across Igbo land, fought with spears, muskets, and sheer courage. The British claimed they were dismantling a center of superstition and ending a source of slave trading. But for the people of the region, it was clear, this was not a war of moral cleansing. It was a war of control. The Arochukwu shrines were destroyed. The oracle was silenced. Priests were arrested or killed. Sacred objects were looted. The spiritual geography of an entire civilization was torn apart. What had once been a voice shaping nations was reduced, in colonial records, to a footnote in the conquest of Nigeria. Yet even in silence, the spirit of Ibini Ukpabi lingered. Though its political power was broken, its memory lived on, in folklore, in resistance narratives, and in the cultural DNA of the Igbo people. For decades, stories of the oracle's wisdom, terror, and fairness continued to circulate. Elders whispered of its mysteries. Shrines persisted in hidden corners. Some claimed the voice could still be heard in dreams. The British may have destroyed the structures, but they could not erase the idea. The oracle, after all, was never just a place. It was a belief that justice could be spiritual, that authority could be shared, and that truth was more than what colonial courts decreed. In the aftermath of colonization, Nigeria's history was rewritten by new hands. Official textbooks rarely mentioned the oracle. The Aro Confederacy became a shadow of its former self. But in Igbo consciousness, the Ibini Ukpabi remained. It became a symbol, not of fear, but of what was lost and what still might be reclaimed. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in indigenous African knowledge systems. Scholars, artists, and spiritual leaders have begun to revisit the legacy of the oracle. Was it purely a tool of control? Or was it, in its prime, a rare example of decentralized, community-centered justice? Archaeologists have explored the ruins. Anthropologists have collected oral testimonies. And among the Igbo, conversations have reignited about autonomy, cultural restoration, and spiritual heritage. There are efforts to preserve what remains of the oracle site in Arochukwu. Cultural festivals honor its memory. Films and novels reimagine its past. Activists have pointed to the history of the oracle as proof that African societies had their own sophisticated systems of governance and law before colonialism ever arrived. For a younger generation raised in post-colonial Nigeria, the story of Ibini Ukpabi is not just history, it is identity. What made the oracle powerful was not only its spiritual depth but its social function. It mediated conflicts across boundaries. It offered a model of justice based on collective belief. It gave voice to those seeking truth in a world without police, prisons, or paper trails. And it proved that authority, in African contexts, could be diffuse, spiritual, and rooted in consensus rather than coercion. The voice of the oracle shaped nations, not through conquest, but through counsel. It connected people who shared no central government, no standing army, and no common script. It gave the Igbo world something rare, a unifying institution in a decentralized society. And when colonial guns shattered its walls, they did not erase its power, they only transformed it into memory. That memory still walks the forests of Arochukwu. It echoes in the silence of the cave. It hums in the chants of elders, in the curiosity of children, and in the minds of those who still ask, what did we lose when we lost the voice of Ibini Ukpabi? In a country still wrestling with justice, truth, and unity, perhaps the oracle has one more message left to give, not as a mystical voice from the past, but as a reminder that Africa once governed itself, judged itself, and believed in the power of its own wisdom.